to order. Welcome everybody to our meeting of the Service Authority. Our first order of business, of course, is to receive any public comment. I don't see any public in the room. I'm looking at the screen. Have we got anybody staff signed up to speak? All right, so I'll put it out there. Anybody want to offer any comments this afternoon? Okay, seeing and hearing none, we'll just move on to the minutes, please, from October 25th. Hopefully everybody had a chance to glance through those. What's the pleasure of the board on those?
I move we accept. Present it. I'll second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Frank,
Got it. Thank you.
this is Frank.
Yes, sir.
This is Bill in Richmond. You need to vote
Electronic participation.
That's right. Yeah.
participation electronically. He stated the reason is bad knee. That's good enough.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that. Sorry, we cruised right through that. So can I get a motion to allow remote electronic participation for Mr. Patrick?
I move that we allow electronic participation.
Thank you.
For Frank.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Aye.
Thanks, Bill. All righty, so next up, we've got our audit. I see Matt McLaren on the call. So Matt, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For those that I don't know, which I think is about everyone in that room, I am Matt McLaren. I'm with Robinson Farmer Cox Associates, and our firm performed the fiscal year 23 audit, and here to present the results of that audit, but also answer any questions that the board may have as it pertains to our audit procedures or the audit conclusions. First order of business in my remarks regarding the required communications between an auditor and a governing body. Those are documented in a letter issued to the governing body of the board in a separate document. To briefly review those, starting with the first point of communication, responsibilities under the audit. The auditors have a responsibility, of course, and that is to test the documents, test the controls, and opine on the financial statements. Management of the authority also has an important role, and that is to maintain records sufficient for audit, maintain a system of controls, and present those documents necessary to complete our audit field work. The next item described in this letter, accounting principles and accounting estimates. Most financial statements include estimates in the preparation of the financial statements. The authority also had some estimates, and those key estimates for the authority were related largely to the measurement of OPEB and pension liabilities, but also to the measurement of the liability related to landfill closure and post-closure. The next item described in this letter, difficulties encountered in performing the audit. Please report that we had no difficulties. Also in this letter is items related to corrected, uncorrected misstatements. Most audits include audit adjustments. Those audit adjustments that are included in the financial statements are considered corrected misstatements. Uncorrected misstatements are those that have been proposed throughout the audit process that management has disagreed with and are not included in the audit financial report. And please report there were no uncorrected misstatements. Lastly, we're required, of course, to disclose any significant audit findings. These will also be described in what we call the yellow book of the internal control report. Please report there were no significant audit findings for the FY23 audit. At this time, Mr. Rogers, I'm going to move forward to the bound financial report. This is the actual audited financial statements. Starting with page 1 is the independent auditor's report. This is the official opinion on the material accuracy of the financial statements. And please report if issued an unmodified or clean opinion, opinion without modification for the fiscal year 23 audit. Also in this same document are the actual financial statements. The first of the 3 key financial statements can be found on page 9. That is Exhibit 1, if you're following along. So Exhibit 1 is quite lengthy, spans the course of 2 pages, pages 9 and 10. The first page reports mostly the assets of the authority. The second page, on page 10, reports the liabilities and net position. The net position at June 30, 2023, the equity was approximately $8.5 million. The second of the three core financial statements can be found on page 11, Exhibit 2. This is a statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, very similar to an income statement. Starting with the total revenues for the authority, the total expenses right below it, and you'll see the increase or decrease in that equity is the third number from the bottom. There's an increase in net position or equity of approximately $606,000 for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2023. And lastly, the third and final financial statements can be found on page 12. This is the statement of cash flows, Exhibit 3. There's a lot of information on this page. You'll find the double underlined about 2/3 of the way down the page. This is the ending cash position for the authority, and that was approximately $17 million at June 30, 2023. As I mentioned, also in this document is what we call the internal control report, or the report over financial reporting, and that is found on page 57 and 58, the very last 2 pages of this document. And if we had non-compliance or significant deficiencies in the reporting structure, those would be described in this report. Please report if issued a clean report for the year ending June 30, 2023, free of non-compliance with laws or internal control deficiencies. That concludes my remarks. Happy to answer any questions the board has at this time.
Thank you. Any questions for Matt? Matt, can I just ask you to expand on Exhibit 3?
Certainly.
The double underline you referenced, we're going from about 21 million to it looks like 17. Can you just talk to me a little bit about that difference in a summary sort of fashion?
Absolutely. If you look up just about 10 rows or so, you'll see a purchase of capital assets. There's a large negative number, about 6.4 million. This describes the other numbers on this page in large terms, describe the use and or receipt of the cash. The large negative number there that is driving that decrease was the use of the cash for a construction project, largely phase 5. And so as bond proceeds are issued, the cash balance goes up. As the project commences and goes through the process and they pay the vendors, the construction, the cash balance comes down. And that number right there represents the cash expended for the project during the fiscal year, which explains largely that decrease, significant decrease in that cash balance.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, I'll look to the group again. Any other questions?
I just have a general question. Just how would you characterize the financial status of the authority based on these audits?
Yeah, I think the authority is in a strong financial position. Obviously, there are some very large liabilities, namely the closure, post-closure, but at this point in time, I think the authority is in a strong position.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else got anything else? All right, seeing and hearing none. Matt, thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, this moves us on to the reciprocal agreement between ourselves and Bedford. I think it was included in our agenda package, correct? That over to staff.
Yeah, Bedford County has approached us to enter into a mutual aid agreement or a reciprocal agreement for emergency use of facilities. That agreement is included in your packet. It's very similar to one we had in the past with the Roanoke Valley Resource Authority that I think expired now, but the Bedford has asked us to consider entering into that agreement. Bill has reviewed that, and I think he has some comments.
I have 2 comments. One is there is a provision to get out quickly by either party, which is good. And secondly, there's a provision in here. It's 4E, and it basically says that each side will keep the other side, hold the other side harmless from any damage that's caused by their use of our landfill or our use of their landfill. Although it says to the extent permitted under applicable law, I don't think we can enter into that because it's a hold harmless indemnification clause. Talked to Patrick Skelly, the Bedford County attorney. He agreed. He said he was fine with taking that out. And so I'd be fine with the agreement other than 4E.
And Bill, can you just get on the record what that exit provision is?
Yeah, I think it's 30 days. Clark, let's see. Yeah, 30 days written notice to either party, so we can get out in 30 days. So there's a quick exit.
When I talked to Mike Dorsey at Bedford about this, he did say that, of course, they don't have the capacity to accept every single ton that we accept each day, but they would accept up to the number that they would be able to process, which is a reduced number. So we would, if on the rare occasion that we would have to implement some use of this agreement, we would of course need to find other disposal sources.
So you parse out our flow. We know you could put some in Bedford, and then you'd have to figure out where the rest would go.
Right.
Should that be stated in here?
Well, I guess when we revise the agreement, we could bring that up. I don't know if they'll be able to provide us with a specific number or not, but I could ask.
Well, Candy, I don't know what you're after, but maybe not even a specific number, but
Right.
language acknowledging that reality, right?
Right.
Yeah, for the next group that may be sitting here,
Mhm.
whatever, it's automatically used.
But the first initial term is 6 months.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at. It's, I guess, fiscal year.
Yeah, 6 months and then it automatically renews.
Is there anything that prompted this
I got a
that you
phone
know
call.
of or aware of? Okay.
So
We go ahead. Sorry.
I just have some questions about Bedford's
Yeah.
landfill. It seems like they've been in the news. I haven't followed it or talked to Mr. Hiss in any kind of detail. Are they doing a transfer station or a landfill or?
They have a new, very nice transfer station that they built in the last couple of years that where they're processing their waste, and they right now they have an agreement with another, and I'm not sure where it is. I think it's Brunswick, the landfill out of Brunswick, where they're hauling their waste from the transfer station to Brunswick County. They've approached us numerous times about bringing it to us, but we're not in a position right now to accept any out of region or out of authority trash. I think they've been doing some solid waste studies on whether or not they want to look at reopening their landfill out in Bedford County. I believe they do have some permitted space out there, so I'm not really sure where they are with that. But yeah, I don't know of any reason other than just having something like this in place that they contacted us about this. We did have a similar agreement with Roanoke County. I mean, Roanoke Valley Resource Authority years ago, and just I don't believe, I think that is expired. It was probably 10 years ago when we entered into that agreement. I think it's pretty much almost the same language as this. And I believe, Bill, you had the same comment about the hold harmless when we went over that one. So
Glad to be consistent.
but I don't know of any reason why they wanted this other than just having something in place in case they haven't had an issue.
Knowing that we have limited capacity in the landfill, does this put us at any risk? I mean, I guess it's we can get out of it with 30 days notice, but does this put us at any risk that we accelerate the space remaining at the landfill?
Well, like I said, we can, we can exit the agreement, within a 30-day period. So, in Bedford County's volume, for a short amount of time like that, probably wouldn't have much of an impact on our capacity. If for some reason they would have to use this.
So Clark, I know that during the snow event, correct me if I'm wrong, but the landfill was closed for a period of time. Is that accurate?
Yeah, a couple hours.
In a situation like that, would we have access to Bedford's landfill?
Theirs was closed as well. When we have storm events like that, typically everybody shuts down. Our haulers won't even operate during snow events like that. We contact all of our major haulers and our members in the event of a forecast for snow like that to make sure that what their schedule is, and we let them know what we're planning on doing. And typically what we do is our staff will show up and begin clearing the landfill access roads, get the scale cleared off, and put the appropriate measures down, like salt and abrasives, to make sure our roads are safe before we open up.
So who do you contact at the local level, like for us?
Buzz has a contact for your hauler, I believe Thompson Trucking,
Okay.
and he'll contact them, and we contact your people at Appomattox, and of course, I believe it's GFL. Yeah, and of course they shut down completely during, just like all of our other major haulers. They're not going to put their trucks out on the road until it's safe for them to go. So.
Who does the hauling for Bedford County? Do they haul their own trash?
I believe Thompson Trucking does theirs.
Okay,
I believe.
I didn't know if it was the company. You mentioned a transfer station, so I didn't know.
Yeah, they transfer their waste on tractor trailers to another landfill, and I think Thompson Trucking is their contractor.
Okay.
So I'm a little defensive of our capacity too, but I wonder, flipping that, in the absence of this agreement, what's our plan? If something goes wrong, seeing this through the lens of what if Bedford needs to hear, but what's our plan? What's our option right now if something happens and we can't access our landfill, right? That road is very specific. If it gets cut off, just something like that.
Well, if that ever happens, I would certainly, first person I'd call was Roanoke Valley Resource Authority, and they would, I'm sure that, based on our past agreements and history with them, that they would be willing to help us out. And I can reach back out to them and see if, we want to renew this reciprocal agreement.
I was just curious, in the absence of a reciprocal agreement with somebody, do we have a little bit of exposure, and does that mitigate some of my concern about being open to the risk on the other side? And then since they run a transfer station, I think there's a $3 a ton markup, right? Is that the deal when you go to the other facility? You pay their tip fee plus $3?
Yeah, I think it's.
And so are we then just using their transfer facility, or are we using landfill?
Well, right now we would be using their transfer facility.
Whatever modality.
Yeah, right. Because their landfill is closed.
It is. Okay.
Yeah.
Bedford.
Bedford landfill is closed.
Okay.
There is language in here in 4B that says each party reserves a right at any time to determine the disposal capacity of its facility and to refuse to accept any waste from the other party if acceptance would exceed available capacity.
Yeah, I like that language. It's just available capacity, to me seems to be a point of argument, right? Is it the remaining capacity of the landfill or the capacity available for sharing?
Right.
That makes any sense.
It's not defined.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm agreeable to it just because the first term is for 6 months and it'll give me some time to.
And hope
Monitored
nothing
up.
happens,
I
right?
want to be neighborly. I want us to have a backup plan. But I am concerned about our landfill capacity, and Bedford had an opportunity to join the region.
Right.
Had an opportunity to buy into the region. I don't know. I can go either way, guys. What's the group think on this?
Not overly opposed to it.
That's sort of how I feel, which is not.
I just
strong
fear
support.
the capacity issue, yeah.
I mean, it's for emergencies only. It's
So
not like
how
it's
would
gonna
we
be-
know? I mean, you would contact us and said Bedford has an emergency, they're bringing their trash here. Because if we decide they're bringing a volume here, we want that 30-day where we can pack if we need to, right?
Or, I mean, the way it reads, we wouldn't even have to accept it in the first place.
Okay.
Isn't that the way that read, Bill?
That's-
Well, I think we determine our own capacity and, so I would think we could say we can only take this much trash for a day. If they argued with us, then we terminate the contract.
Yeah. It almost needs to be predetermined though, because if there's an emergency, you don't have a lot of time to speculate and negotiate and all that.
Yeah, I'm a little gun shy about
Yeah.
ambiguous agreements
I am too.
where there could be a difference of opinion over what words and intent. I wonder if it's not resolved for me if we shortened up the notice period. Like, is there a meeting in the middle where you say you got 2 weeks instead of 30 days?
Yeah.
Because, it would pare down the amount of trash we had coming in before we did a checkup. Is that meaningful or is that just making a change that's really not operationally effective necessarily?
Clark, what would we do right now in case of an emergency?
Well, Frank had just asked that same question, and I said that, and again, I think this would be a rare occasion that this would happen. The only thing that would probably prevent us from accepting trash is if the haul road for some reason washed out, which is right now, especially after the improvements we recently made to it, would be very, very, very unlikely. I would just get on the phone to our counterparts and find a place to put the trash.
Okay.
We did have like I said, we did have a similar agreement with Roanoke Resource Authority, but for one reason or other, we just haven't renewed it recently. So we could always look at renewing that agreement with Roanoke Valley Resource Authority.
I feel like we picked that up when they were having trouble with rail transporters.
If you're telling me that if we had an emergency, we could find a place to put our trash, then I don't know why we would risk our capacity on an agreement like this. Right? I mean, the benefit that we would have to have, we would want to receive a benefit from this, and there doesn't seem to be one. Doesn't seem to be much of a benefit for us if we could put a plan in place.
Yeah, Bedford could probably only accept a small fraction of our daily tonnage.
But we could accept all of theirs.
Yeah, we could process all of theirs, yes.
I am so.
I mean, you
was just-
wouldn't be really right, but we have 5 or 6 years of capacity left. We're not getting much out of this. It doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense.
That by way of a motion to decline the reciprocal agreement, Greg?
So moved.
There a second? I'll second it for discussion. All right. Discuss.
Well, I think most of us are concerned about the good neighbor aspect of it. And maybe not have a formal agreement, but an understanding if there were an emergency situation and they needed something, possibly contact us, we might can help them, we may not, I mean, I think like you said, you would have to call somebody and say, hey, will you take our trash?
And under special circumstances like that, I would find it hard to believe that one of our counterparts wouldn't help us out.
Right. And I hope maybe we could do the same if we understand.
And really, that would only be the members' trash that we would have to be concerned with, is if something like that did happen, the private guys would have to find their own place to take it. But again, I think, based on, our history of our operation and our facilities, I think it would be rare for that to
All right, any other discussion, questions for staff? So
So
we
if
get,
there's no motion, there's no.
I mean, I would like to think that if we do decline the reciprocal agreement, that we would have a good conversation with their staff explaining the logic behind it, and and that in a circumstance, in an emergency circumstance, a phone call would very likely allow us to work together for a short period of time, right?
Oh, yeah, I certainly can make that phone call if the agreement is declined.
yeah, I'd be comfortable with saying we're, willing to operate in a spirit of collegiality and neighborliness, but don't want to be constrained by a formal agreement. Kind of where I'm at.
Yeah.
Uh, And so maybe rather than offending somebody with a motion to deny the request, we simply ask staff to convey that sentiment. What's the thought of the 44?
I would accept that as a friendly amendment to my motion.
I could also probably change the agreement to say, you can ask us, but we don't have to do it.
Wow.
In which case I would beg to understand the value of the agreement.
Yeah.
Okay, so I now understand Greg's motion is to simply direct staff to reach out to points of contact in Bedford, convey our willingness to consider on a case-by-case basis our ability to assist, but our reluctance to enter into a formal agreement based on our concerns about existing capacity.
Second that.
Is that correct, Greg?
Chairman.
Okay, and I heard Susan second it. Any further discussion? I'll ask all in favor of that. Please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed to that? All right, thank y'all. Okay, that brings us to emergency solid.
Speaking of
waste
emergency, speaking of emergencies, on December 11th and 12th, we had an electrical surge at the landfill, and it took out the whole scale house operation. Both scales went down. First time it's happened since we've been operating regionally. It's very rare. Occasionally one scale will go down for maintenance or a problem, and we could continue to use the other scale to weigh in and weigh out. But this time both scales were down. The whole scale house was down. Got hit with some kind of an electrical surge. We had a storm, and it took out a bunch of equipment down at the landfill. First time it's ever happened. I really doubt it'll happen again, but just in case, the weights and measure folks visited us, and we discussed the issues with them, and they said, number one, it was illegal to bill on truck averages. If you're not weighing the truck in and out, getting a tear weight, it's illegal to bill it based on averages. But the remedy to that is developing a fee schedule based on truck sizes. So they recommended that we have something in place in case it ever happens again, that when a customer approaches the scale, our scales are down, we can't weigh them, we hand them the fee schedule, and they can make a decision whether or not they want to pay that fee or not. And then that would be the only legal way that we could collect the revenue from the tonnage. Those 2 days, we just let our customers come into the landfill and use the landfill. And basically they got a day and a half of disposal with not being charged. We have an insurance policy that covers lost revenue and the repair costs, which were about $10,000 to get everything back up and running. So we're working on a claim for about roughly $30,000 of lost revenue for that day and a half, and also the damages. So we're working on getting that complaint submitted to take care of that issue. But on the other issue, hopefully that we won't have to deal with again, and we will have a means of actually charging customers I'm presenting this fee for solid waste disposals. We were gonna ask Bill about this, of whether or not we needed a public hearing for this, since fees are involved.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So these numbers were we calculated basically by just looking at the history, and we did use averages to come up with these fees, to come up with a fee for each of this type, each type of truck that we typically would get. We've got the commercial rates and the member rates. This is for your consideration and approval.
I think having a fee schedule beats giving it for free and then trying to catch up with insurance.
Yeah.
So if this approximates what we would have charged them at the scales, I think it looks like a sound strategy. What's the group think? All right, I see some heads nodding. So can I get a motion to approve the fees for solid waste disposal in the event of scale malfunction?
I so move.
A motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, thank you very much. Next. Financial report. Staff,
Saturday, first got this.
As Mark said, we did have some lost revenue in December, so we're down. What we really expected in December. Calculated it's approximately $30,000 that we had lost revenue. I currently have about $8,000 we can spend in December for repairs to the scales. As Mark said, there's probably some more in January, we'll catch up with it. It's out of the ordinary.
anybody got any questions for Sandy? No? Okay. Right. Next, budget consideration.
We have prepared our proposed FY 2025 budget. I'll pass out the budget summary. You kind of wrap up what's in the budget. Once you get those copies in front of you, I'll go to something.
Can we email that to Greg?
Clark, is there any way to email that to me?
You read it, Greg?
No, ma'am.
Yeah, I'll send it to you right now, Greg.
Thank you.
Yeah, let us know when you have the document, Greg, and I'll start going over it.
Nothing yet? Is it a big file, Clark?
No, I'm still looking forward to my email. Sorry. Should have it now.
All right, I got it. Let's go.
Okay, revenue tonnage projection. Member tons, 70,910 tons, no change. Market rate tons, 124,416 tons, no change from FY 24. Revenue projection would be $8,887,500. It's a 24.11% increase over 2024. I'll get to that later. Operating expenses, $7,633,361. That's a 19.66 increase over FY 24. And that's mostly due to funding $2 million contribution to our post-closure reserve for livestock landfill. We'll talk about that a little bit later too. Total expenses is $8,887,500. That's a 17% increase over FY 24. And the difference there is the total expenses includes the airspace of reserve expense. We have a 5% salary increase proposed for July 1st. We also have some consultant money in there for a retention plan study, anticipating the Livestock Road landfill reaching capacity in 2029. We are looking at some retention policies and retention ideas for our staff and operators. Hopefully we'll be able to come up with something sometime this year for you to consider. Proposed tipping fee, member rate, $39.08 per ton. That's a 29.2% increase. The market rate, which is maintaining our $10 differential, is $49.08 per ton. That's a 22% increase over FY 24. Please note that the authority has not increased the member or market rate tipping fee for the 7 previous budget years, and only a 50-cent tipping fee increase 10 years ago. The proposed tipping fee increase is mainly to fund our livestock closure and post-closure reserve, so that when we do reach capacity, we will have the money in the bank to fund the closure cap construction project and then the 30-year post-closure period. The attached pro forma budget, which we've always used as a guide for budgeting purposes, and was updated last year, indicates a member rate of $38.64 for FY 25, and then stabilizing about $41 to $42 per ton through FY 29, at which point the Livestock Road landfill will reach its expected capacity. And then I've included the historical tipping fees for the authority for the last 10 or 11 years. After you have a chance to review that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So if I may, a question, you're proposing a member rate of 39.08 versus the pro forma 38.64. Can you speak to the difference?
Yeah, it's just a fluctuation in the pro forma budget isn't quite as detailed as our actual operating budget. So there's just some small differences in line items when we prepared the proposed budget going line item through line item. We ended up with a little bit higher pro forma, and that hasn't been unusual. Some years it comes in just a little bit lower. Some years it comes in a little bit higher. 10 years.
And then in terms of tonnage, I know we're not projecting a change, but do you have data on total tonnage for the past 5 years or so? What's our trend? I mean, I see the month to month, but I'm talking annualized.
Well, we had a spike during COVID. It went up a little bit. We did make an adjustment a couple of years ago, and we did increase our projections, but it's starting to level back down a little bit. The tonnage today is roughly running where it should be. December is a little bit skewed because we didn't get that 2.5 days of tonnages. But I only include revenue tonnage in our tonnage report, so that's why that showed December down a little bit. But yeah, if anything, we're leveling off with tonnages, I would be hesitant to try to increase our tonnage projection for next year.
And then final question, what's the 5% compensation adjustment rooted in? Is that tied to a market indicator, tied to, you're proposing a 5% raise, why 5%?
That's just in the last few years, that's kind of where we've settled. We just use that as a plug-in.
I think the state's proposing one.
It's a bonus. I mean, the
That's
governor,
right, a
the
one-time
governor's budget
bonus.
is zero.
I think second year is what?
Some.
I think it'll change, but I don't think it's gonna be as high as it's been.
We're guessing 3.
Yeah.
Probably
It's a
around
guess. So,
I think our school division was projecting 2% in their budget, so we tend to be
Follow that,
comparable,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so what action do you need from the authority board relative to the budget today? We don't adopt it till later in the year. I know you typically introduce it this early so that we have time to process it. We've discussed tip fees many times in the past, and I understand that would require a public hearing, right?
Yes.
If we want to consider a tip fee increase. So when would the public hearing have to happen?
It could happen at the next meeting if we agree in principle that this is the kind of where we need to be. If the board would like us to make any adjustments, then we would have to come back at the next board meeting with another proposal. And then we would probably be looking at the June meeting for a budget approval.
Okay, but you don't have any prescribed timelines like we do around your public hearing being so many days from the adoption and implementation of the rates.
I don't think so. Is that right, Bill?
No, we don't.
Okay.
You don't have to do it by a certain date of the year
Or 7 days.
before July 1st.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to wait 7
So-
days.
So Clark, looking at the tipping fee, there's a pretty substantial increase and then much smaller increases through the life of the landfill. Have we looked at more graduated increases? So I know going up 20-odd% in a year is fairly substantial. I mean, have you looked at I know ultimately the tipping fee at the end of the road would be higher as a result. But sometimes from a budgeting standpoint, you know, once an expense is in the base, it's easier to fund than it is to fund those increments. Have you looked at other more graduated proposals and what that would mean?
Well, we basically have 4 budget years left before we reach capacity. So, you know, we could look at reducing this year's increase, but next year's increase would likely be higher. But we could certainly look at if you can give us a target of where you would like us to be this year, we could run some models to see how that would impact our tipping fee for the next few years. If you have a target.
I don't think we have a target, right? It's sorry about that. It's there's a couple things to think through when it comes to the tipping fee. Number one, our commercial haulers are bringing 2/3 of the trash to the landfill, right?
Yes.
And as a result, any increase in the tipping fee is going to mean that any amount of the operating revenue we can use to pay down the post-closure requirements is going to be paid 2/3 by the commercial haulers, 1/3 by the localities, roughly, right? And any year that we don't increase the tipping fee on the commercial haulers means that the localities are going to have to, in the long run, make up that difference, essentially. So money, post-closure expenses that could have been paid by commercial haulers are going to end up being paid by localities, right? Which is, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. That said, is there anything that would keep us from doing the full increase for our commercial haulers and a smaller, more graduated increase for the localities that would give us some more budget flexibility, but make it so we don't lose out on the revenue we could use to pay the post-closure costs from our commercial haulers? It would increase the split essentially for a period of time.
Yeah, we don't necessarily have to maintain that $10 differential. It could be higher, it could be lower. I would have to review our member use agreement on the formula that we're using. And I think it's tied more to the cost of service versus the commercial rate versus the just flat out $10. I will need to review that to see what that says.
What was done by man can be undone by man, right?
That's true.
And I'll tell you, I would much rather, and I don't know if the rest of you guys hate this idea, but I would much rather our commercial haulers pay as much of those post-closure costs as possible, right? That certainly makes the most sense to me. Now, that being said, would an increased tipping fee that is substantial for the commercial haulers drive their behavior to, would it drive them to other landfills, right?
Maybe not in the short term, because there's not a regional transfer station around here. And they would have to direct haul to another landfill until they were able to make their own decisions on whether or not to transfer out of this region with their own private transfer station. So in the short run, I don't think it would have a huge impact. Maybe some fringe areas might look at other options around the fringe areas of the authority boundaries. But in the long term, which we're going to be at capacity in about 4 years anyway, 4 or 5 years anyway. So I'm not so sure if we would lose a huge market share during that period, unless we just got unreasonable with our commercial tipping fees.
Right, and I don't know what this is more concept than a firmed up plan, but my general thought would be you something along the lines of if it's a $10 a month tipping or a $10 a ton tipping fee increase that we're calling for, you do 5 for the localities and 10 for the commercial haulers. You get the commercial haulers to the pro forma amount, and you give the localities more time to catch up to those incremental cost increases.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. And about a month ago, I sent out a chart of other authorities and what they're charging, and I guess the Pennsylvania County landfill and the Prince Edward County landfill are the closest, and they're at $41 and $40 a ton for the commercial haulers. So it may or may not make sense for some of our commercial haulers to direct haul to those landfills. That's a question I just can't answer.
Sure. I don't know. I'd be interested if anyone had any thoughts or.
My thought is that maybe we need to generally acknowledge that some tip fee increase is going to be necessary and advertise a public hearing. My presumption being we can always come in below whatever we advertise. So is this our advertised number while we have staff work through some of what I think are interesting suggestions, Greg? What is it at 35 and 49? What is it at whatever else and 49, so that by the time we come in for that public hearing, maybe we've got sort of this upper limit of what's on the table, anticipating will it come in below that with some additional input from staff as to what that might look like. And then I would be remiss if I didn't just note that that difference between member and commercial,
It's excess rate.
it is the money that is in dispute, right? So if it's not $10 and it's 15, then those buckets just mathematically change. a
We're on
little
the
bit.
same link. I was thinking,
Um,
oh, gosh.
Which I'm okay with, because that means a greater share for the authority at their 25% or whatever it ends up being, but just introducing that wrinkle to the consideration as well.
Look, I get it, but
And
what
it
we're
is-
doing is insanity right now, which is not raising rates and missing out on an opportunity to have the primary users of the landfill fund the post-closure requirements.
I agree with that 100%, Greg. It's just, yeah, I'm there. I think with 4 years left, I don't want to eat this thing all up in the last year. I'd rather start tackling it now in some sort of increment. It does, if it can be something other than $39, you've got my attention, but 4 years is going to be gone in no time. So I'm not going to have the money 4 years from now either. Got to figure it out a little at a time.
Can I ask staff to generate a report? We could go back and research, but it's easier for you guys to send it in a condensed version. So what's been the unspent funds at the end of the year for the last, say, I don't know, five years?
Unspent, the excess revenue that we're making.
No, I mean like your operational budget. What's been that? I mean, I know you didn't spend every penny, so what's been that?
You think of growth in fund balance, basically, right?
Yeah, right.
And you want it year over year, not total, right? Susan?
Right, I
That's
wanted
what
each
wanna
year
see.
so we could kind of compare, are we not spending $800,000, but we're trying to,
Yeah, I think kind of just a quick gauge of that is our cost of service versus our tipping fees. And at the end of the year, most of the time it's really close. So which means
Last 2 years, haven't we had to borrow from the post-closure fund to fund operations?
yes, that's because we're not using the 25% share of the excess revenue in our operations budget.
So fund balance is not fund balance is not growing then, right?
Correct. Not the last couple of years. We can go back 5 years. That's no problem. Should report it where we were each of the last 5 years.
So I'm gonna go ahead just to keep this moving and put forward a motion that we advertise a public hearing at the proposed rates concurrent with the direction to staff to run out some scenarios. Clark, you asked for a range. There it is. I'd like it to be less than what we're seeing. And I'd like to see what that might look like. To Greg's point, how you phase that in a little more gently instead of up big 1 year and then moderate the other. Does that make sense? So I'll put that on the table as a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, so we got a motion and a second. Additional discussion, guys. What do y'all think?
so we will have, like you're talking about, closer to that end, we haven't used any of that 25%. It hasn't been included
You borrowed it from closure.
from closure,
So
but
you-
that would be replenishing that amount.
Presumably, that was the whole point, right? Like, once it's all settled,
Would go
that would go back into that pot. Yes, ma'am. That's my understanding. Staff, correct me if I'm wrong, that's right. But it wouldn't increase closure. It would just
Basically,
bring it back up to where it was when we started borrowing from it. Which without a rate increase isn't enough. Is that correct? That's right.
So we can advertise the 3908, and then we can come in at any amount lower.
I'm treating it like our
After public
budget's a
hearing.
tax
That's
rate,
what I'm
saying
making sure that
if we
can do
advertise
that.
we can change anything after the public hearing.
downward, I don't know if we can take it up.
Right.
Well, no,
That's
yeah.
Yeah, but
I don't think we're going up.
right.
No,
Bill, are we on sound ground there? You got some administrators doing local budget process here and tax rates. Our presumption being we can always take it down, but not up.
That's correct.
So yes, Andy, I'm kind
Okay.
of setting a ceiling that we try to get.
Right. Just want to make sure.
And so that, I presume that would be at the April meeting. All right, so we got a motion and a second. We've had some discussion. Anything else before I call for a vote? All right, all in favor of proceeding, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. I'll note for the record, reluctant from all four of us,
Yeah,
you know, so
it was a low.
just to convey the spirit of the authority. Okay, let's see what you guys can come up with on that, please. All right, anything else on the budget?
So are you all gonna look at also looking at different percentage salary increase proposals and how that impacts the proposed budget?
For my own sake, I like to see what 1% is. And I can
Yeah, we
sort of-
we can
I
do that,
can do the back of
yeah.
the envelope math to say
Right.
2, 3, 4, 5, whatever.
And just to clarify, I guess, what I'm reading on paper, it looks like we did have a significant decrease in our debt service. From
$700,000.
Begin to pay off the overlap themselves.
Robinson is 730.
change.
That has to do with the phasing of the payoffs for themselves. That's not finished off one. And then that's that. So start paying debt service on those in 5.
The 5 kicks in.
Yeah. Alec, did you have a question? Sir?
I might, yeah. Clark had said a target number, so we choose one, or we can try to do 2 or 3. We would do a couple things to that target number. One is that we could make that a starting point and go back to our friends, Burns McDonald pro forma, and say, put that target number into FY25 and see what that does to the next 3 fiscal years, so that there's more of a ramping up as opposed to the big jump and plateau as discussed. That's the first thing we do. The second thing we can do, if I heard you all correctly, is take a look at what it would look like to take that delta between the target number and the cost of service of 3908 and build out what a market rate would be that's greater than $10 more than the member rate, and see, because we can back into a number that the market rate would be by, now granted that would require us to use a portion of that 25% that goes to authority for operating purposes. However, if that was of value, we could do that too, because there would be a way to back into a market rate that is different than the $10 delta and cover costs and cover our costs. If that was, if I'm that Mr. Patrick seemed to suggest there may be a value in paying more than $10. So
I think my point, Alec, was what we know right now is if we're going to fully fund the post-closure costs, we should be at $39 and $49 or whatever the number, right? So if we just make the argument that the commercial rate gets set at $49, what are the impacts to the localities if the locality number is something less than that? Maybe a couple of different numbers. So is it 34? Is it 36? Whatever it might look like, and what does that do to the localities tipping fee in the later years, right? And you may even get to a point, because of how the math works out, where in the last couple of years of the life of the landfill, the locality rate is, or the split or spread actually becomes less than the $10, because we're essentially borrowing from that spread up front in order to make the incremental costs less expensive in the front end. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone.
I think it does, but like where I'm going with this is that we can do one of two things if based on that model. The first thing we can do is, just for round numbers, propose a $35 member rate and a $50 market rate, and then treat all that $15 increment as excess revenue, setting aside as we're doing currently. Or we can use a portion of that $15 increment to fund you know, operations to offset our cost of service. I think where we might be heading is that we should look at continuing to underfund post-closure in the next fiscal based on a lower revenue. Because I want to be sure that I'm hearing correctly what you'd like to see us pitch for the April meeting. So what I mean by that is if we need to have,
I think it's just options, Alec, right?
I was gonna say, I want to see both, you know, and whatever else you think of between now and then.
Okay.
I'm generally comfortable with taking the commercial to 49, because we know mathematically that's where they ought to be. And then how do we phase the local money in a little differently is will basically be my question. And I assume particularly Appomattox and Nelson respectfully aren't really paying a ton of that commercial rate anyway, would be agreeable to that, so that you optimize the commercial percentage in. And then instead of $8 in 1 year, if it's to Greg's point, 4 or 6, is it 8 in a subsequent year instead of 4 or 6? So by time, I'd like to see them both.
But based on the action we just took, we couldn't look at over 49 away now.
Right.
For the commercial rate.
You set that at the cap.
That's okay.
And then I would bounce back. I hate to keep beating this drum, but you got to go back to what that delta is defined as in the member use agreement in our financial policy. When you start to say we use some of it for cost of service, I think you're probably fine, but you got to make sure it all what you call it.
okay.
Yeah, that's the other part of the analysis is what is all that?
Yeah.
What does all that look like when run through the member use agreement? But the point would be not to charge the commercial haulers any more than we should be charging them based on our reality, right? But because we know that that's what they should be paying based on where we are. But how do you phase in a smaller increment for the localities? What's that mean?
Got it. Thank you.
All right, staff clear on the direction? Okay, appreciate the question. Thank you all. All right, so now we're into organizational reports.
Yeah, ODA report. Since our last board meeting on October 25th, we've had 3 complaints from 2 different addresses. And in the last 6 months, we've had 6 complaints from 2 addresses.
Is it always the same 2 addresses?
Yes.
Okay.
Tonnage report, as you can see the bar chart, we're kind of up, kind of down month to month. December is a little skewed because we were missing that day and a half. But if you look at back at our budget up to today, we're about 50% of our projection, which is about right.
Any questions for staff on either of those reports? Anything else from staff?
That's all I have.
All right, we have in our packet the meeting calendar. I presume we're looking at the June date for budget adoption.
Yes, that would be the idea, was that we would propose to have the 4th Wednesday, the first month of each quarter, the modification that we meet on June 26th, 2024, instead of the 4th Wednesday of July, in case we need another meeting for the budget adoption. And quite frankly, wouldn't anticipate then we would need to meet also in July.
So that slides us up a little bit for all of that. Made sense. Okay, is there any other business to come before the authority today?
Can I ask one favor of the staff? And this is a nitpicky, I admit, but it makes it way easier. On the agenda that you send out, can you, on the table of contents, can you link the table of contents to the agenda item? So when you go to the table of contents, if we're going to talk about the budget, if I click on the hyperlink on the table of contents for the budget, it'll take you right to that section of the PDF.
I will work on my PDF skills to improve them. Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good suggestion.
You don't use a minutes agenda creator. Usually that don't.
We do it in PDF. It's a right click, add hyperlink, insert page number.
Okay.
My staff, I'm acting like I actually did it for the last board, but yeah, we can help with that if needed, Alec.
I'll learn it.
You'll pick it up in no time.
Yes, sir. I can pick it up.
If I can do it. Very good.
The April meeting, is that enough time for us members to know what to budget in our own budgets for this?
Well, we don't
It seems like,
have to wait till June, right? To approve it.
well, right. But we all need to know what we're gonna be paying. If we don't know what the rate is. Yeah.
So Campbell's approach is gonna be to sort of start out and winnow it down as we go.
Yeah.
You know. We'll put
I
whatever
guess
we
that's-
can in that account, I just don't know.
Yeah, I guess we might have to. But it's well into our own budgetary process.
Yeah.
It's past our adoption. About first Tuesday in April, so we can tax tickets out for the commission.
Even with the long session.
Yeah, because it's just local, tax rates can be twice a year now, so they gotta run it out for the deadline, so. they just-
Right or wrong, our board likes to set the tax rates before the budget's actually finished. Just to meet those deadlines, twice a year. It's tough.
Yeah, that's true, we could just do the rates, but I've just always been, well, if that's all the money bringing. So. Okay, yeah, good thought, but
All right,
we'll just be making our best efforts going forward.
all right.
All right, anybody else got anything while we're together?
Just to apologize for not having a meeting on my calendar. I've sent the meeting schedule to my admin. We're not going to make that mistake again, but thanks for providing the option of being here virtually.
Yeah, I appreciate you joining with the knee, whatever going on, Greg. So thank you for that.
And combing your hair.
All right, guys, I'll take a motion to it.
I got on camera.
I didn't think it was actionable, but
Okay.
yeah, you can- if you'd like to make a motion, I'll vote for it, but
I don't care.
It's already established, right, in its operating procedures and.
I think that's the end is a little bit. Vote on it to make, okay,
That's fine.
all right, motion to adjourn,
I said move second and.
all in favor? Aye. Okay, thank y'all.
In South Carolina, you do have to vote on it, so I can't get out of the habit of putting it.
Uh,